Hello everyone, my name is Kenton Kivestu. I'm an ex-Googler, an ex-BCG consultant, and the founder of RocketBlocks, an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews. In today's RocketBlocks mini lesson, we're going to be focusing on product management interviews, and specifically we're going to talk about product design and product sense questions that come up in these interviews. And what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start by talking about what does a product design or product sense question look like. What are some of the characteristics of it, and then we'll walk through a sample problem. We'll look at one of these sample problems, and then we will put ourselves in the mindset of the interviewer and think about what is he or she evaluating the candidate on as they're going through this type of question, to really sort of understand what sort of skills, traits, and things they want to see exhibited from a candidate while they're going through and answering that type of question. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with product design questions is what people actually refer to them as, because people use a lot of different terms here. You'll hear someone say product design questions, you'll hear someone say product sense questions, sometimes you'll even hear people say product strategy questions. Now, I think the right way to think about these type of questions is that every one of these questions is a little bit of product design or product sense, so pick which one you like best, and then a little bit of product strategy, because you can't really design or think about or discuss a product in abstract in an interview without doing a little bit of like, what is this product for? Who's the market? What's the opportunity, which is the sort of product strategy component? And then what is this product going to look like? How is it going to act? How will it function? How will we actually build it? Which is sort of the product sense or product design component of it. So I like to call them product sense and strategy questions. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the types of product sense and strategy questions that you might face. And generally these end up on one or the other side of a spectrum. On one side, you have what I'll call sort of generic or generalized product sense and strategy questions, which are something like, hey, how would you think about designing a new type of playground for kids? And the reason I say it's generic or general is because there's no company-specific knowledge or sort of industry-specific knowledge, like relative to a SaaS business or say Amazon's product lines, that you need to answer that type of question. It's just a general question about how are you going to think about the strategy and design of this type of product. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a company-specific question. It might be something like, how would you think about improving Gmail's mobile app? That requires a little bit of obviously company-specific knowledge. You need to know about that product. It puts you into the context of that particular company and that particular product. It's still about product strategy and product sense, but the context around it is different. I think both of those types of questions can work, and folks will face both of them in product management interviews. The big pro of a general question, like the playground one that we talked about, is that basically, if you ask a question like that, there's no bias from industry context that gets wrapped up in it, because it's not about what the person is going to do generally on the job. Now, the con of that type of question is if there are particular types of details and roles and nuance to the role that is being interviewed for, a question like that might lose whether the candidate is strong in those particular areas or not. The flip side, if you use the scenario-specific question, does address that con. Like you'll get the idea of, does this candidate understand this particular product area, this particular product space? Do they get some of that nuance? The con of it is there may be a lot of bias from the interviewer, especially if they work at the company or the product that they're asking about, and they have a lot of context that the candidate is not going to have. And sometimes that can bias their own assessment of how the candidate is doing. So that's the con as well. Typically that can be handled by just one, the interviewer being aware of that bias, and two, sort of calibrating over time. If they use this question over and over again with a bunch of candidates, they'll sort of understand the level of knowledge that someone from outside the company would approach that particular product. Okay, so that's the spectrum of different product sense and strategy questions that can come up. Now let's talk about an actual sample question. And we're going to pick one from the company specific area. And this is what we've got here. So say Uber has a big and growing challenge that they're wrestling with, and that is how do they return lost items efficiently to their customers after they lose an item in an Uber car. So you're a new PM at Uber, and your director has asked you to take the lead on designing a new lost item recovery system. Okay, so this is the question that we're going to work with. Now we're going to go into the next section, and we're going to talk about what is the interviewer's mindset as they're evaluating a candidate answering that question. Okay, so now that we know what question we're dealing with, let's take a look at the interviewer mindset when they're evaluating a candidate going through this question. And there's 5 key things I want us to think about. The first is, what is the candidate optimizing for? And have they made that clear? So for example, in the Uber question, the candidate may internally decide that they're going to optimize for the average amount of time it takes to return a lost item. And the lower they can get that number, the better. However, if the interviewer's default assumption is that the way to optimize for this question is to maximize the percentage of lost items correctly returned, then there's going to be a mismatch there. And unless that's called out and there's a discussion had about why the right thing is to optimize for X versus Y, the interviewer might be confused with the candidate's answer because they're thinking about optimizing for a different thing. So the first thing is, what is the candidate optimizing for, and is that clear? Has it been communicated to the interviewer as well? The second thing is structured. Does the candidate have a structured approach to solving this problem? And that's really important for a handful of reasons. The first is that the interviewer wants to confidently know that the candidate wasn't just able to solve this particular problem that was put in front of them, but that they have a problem-solving approach that's clear, that's logical, and that's repeatable. And that if they're on the job, no matter what sort of product problem comes to them, they'll be able to break down that problem and say, okay, for this problem, I'd like to look at bucket A, bucket B, bucket C. These are the things I need to look at. Who are we going to optimize for? What are the customers? What are the pain points, etc. And they can repeat that process in a really structured way. So that's the second key thing. The third is they're going to be thinking about, is the candidate able to traverse the spectrum of product management duties? And so what I mean by this is product management is one of those roles where you spend some time up at 20,000-foot strategy and some time all the way on the opposite end of the spectrum doing nitty-gritty things like triaging bugs or thinking about what color should this particular button be, how should it be designed, where should it be on the screen, that type of thing. And as you're going through a product sense and strategy question like this, you want to show that you can traverse that spectrum. If you're just stuck on the tactical details of colors and what the user flow is going to look like, etc., that's not great, nor is it great if you can only talk about the high level strategy of the product, but you sort of break down, you get into designing the components, the look and feel, and everything like that. So you need to be able to span that spectrum. Then the fourth thing that really matters and the interviewer is going to be thinking about is, does this person understand how to leverage all of the assets that this company has? So especially in these scenario-specific questions, the assets that a company might have in this case are, well, there's various technological assets that Uber has, and there might be some physical assets. So in the lost item recovery question, an asset that they may be able to use is the driver registration centers. Maybe those centers can be repurposed as lost item reclamation centers as well, and customers could go back to those centers to pick up their items after drivers have dropped them off. I don't know that that's the right solution for this particular case. You'd have to look at whether that's more efficient than having drivers just return them directly or some other solution. But it is a type of asset that Uber has that is worth thinking about. How could that be used and leveraged to solve the problem at hand? And then the fifth thing that the interviewer is going to be thinking about is, does this candidate have a sixth sense about product? Do they have some sort of spidey sense about what makes a good product? What's the look and feel like? Do they think about, have a deep understanding of the user standpoint, how to build a product that shows empathy for the situation they're in? Do they really bring some sort of kind of special insight to this problem and care about building products to solve the pain points at hand? Some people like thinking a lot about just the high level strategy. And yeah, we need to do X, but crafting a product is not as exciting to them. And for those people, maybe product management isn't exactly the right profession, because there's a lot of that that goes into building a good product, and that's what interviewers are going to be looking for when they're asking themselves, does this person have that sixth sense about product design? So those are, I think, the five key questions that an interviewer is going to be thinking about as they're assessing a candidate with a question like this. Okay, that should give you a good sense of what is a product sense and strategy question. What types of different flavors do these questions come in? And more importantly, what is the interviewer thinking and assessing a candidate on as they're going through and answering this type of question? And the last meta point I will leave you with is, if you think about a product sense and strategy question and the fact that it's really asking a candidate how they're going to think about designing a product, building a product, launching it, who the customer is, the market, it's all the sort of fun parts of product management. It's not the bad parts of triaging bugs or managing different stakeholders. And so the implication of that is that if it's not clear that a candidate is really engaged and having fun when going through this type of question, it's really sort of tough for interviewers to believe that a candidate is going to have the grit necessary to do the less pleasant aspects of the product management job, like bug triaging on a weekend or managing a complicated set of stakeholders. So that's the final point I'll leave you with, that interviewers are going to be thinking about when they ask one of these type of questions. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet already, there is a big red button below. We've got a ton of great content coming out on both the consulting and product management, career paths, and interviews. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.